It's a little bit different if you are looking for a radiologist, for example. Like, you just need that person to be able to read your scan. You don't have to like them. You don't have to feel comfortable or want to see them on a regular basis. But with psychologists, it's a little bit different, right? There's sort of this more personal aspect that goes into it. So finding a good fit, I think, is really important. Knowing that it is a brave thing to do, right? It takes a lot of courage to take that first step and to seek help. But there are tons of options. And I think most providers now, we sort of realize that there are lots of people that are showing up for the first time feeling that way. My practice actually gets lots of people who had another therapist or counselor and felt like that person was judging them or not really listening to them. And they end up leaving the relationship because of it, which, good for them. That's excellent that they end up doing that.
Welcome to the Paul Croswell audio experience.
Hello, this is your host, Paul Croswell, and I am back with another conversation for you today, and it is with Dr. Julie Landry. Dr. Landry is a board-certified clinical psychologist, co-founder of Calliope Mental Health, and founder of Halcyon Therapy Group out in San Antonio, Texas. I'm very excited about the work she does, and I think you should be too. Here's why. She is at the forefront of making mental health help more accessible in some pretty innovative ways, which you'll hear all about in our conversation in just a few moments. Dr. Landry has more than a decade of experience in working in military medicine as well as private practice, both of which we talk about, and she shares some really cool stories from. She's also helped hundreds of people over the course of her career so far. And her practice, Halcyon Therapy Group, specializes in working with individuals and couples with very busy schedules. So if that's you and that's been your hang up, this might be just for you. So stick around. Now, if you're curious about what it's like to be in therapy, or whether it's actually for you or if it's actually helpful, then you really, really, really want to hear the fullness of this conversation. Without further ado, here's Dr. Landry. Dr. Julie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. There's so much to talk about, and I think there's a lot I'm going to learn from our conversation. But I like to start off each of these conversations simply by asking, how are you? How are you doing today?
I'm good. I was just telling a client this morning, I woke up thinking it was Friday. So I was a little disappointed to realize it's actually Thursday and I still have another day to go for the weekend. But I'm good. Life is busy. I have 2 little boys and work is extremely busy right now. We're launching another company. So things are hectic, but everything is good. No complaints.
That's so awesome. That sounds really exciting. And I'm also happy to know I'm not the only one who thought it was Friday this morning. So that's very comforting.
I don't know if that's a good thing or maybe just a bad thing for both of us, but yeah.
But it sounds like you're in a really exciting season. And I'm just happy for you.
Thank you. Yeah, things are good.
The company you're launching, would that be the I struggle with the pronunciation of that
Halcyon?
Halcyon, okay. Halcyon Group?
No, so Halcyon Therapy Group, we actually launched in June. And now I am launching another business, Calliope is the name of it. And it is adult autism assessments. So everything is virtual. And the idea is to provide a quality assessment for autism in a reasonable amount of time. So it is really common for these assessments to take months as you wait on a waiting list. And then you have the actual evaluation, and then for weeks or months after, you're waiting on results. So our goal is to turn all this around within 1 week. So that when people are really struggling to figure out, like, is this, what's going on with me? Is this what I'm struggling with? We can help them find the answers and then link them to the resources that they need in order to get services.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's
thanks.
super
We're
cool.
excited. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely. So let's take a few steps back then, because I think, that there may be room for that to come up again later on, which if it does, I'd be really excited about that. But you are a board certified clinical psychologist. How long have you been in the field?
Yeah, I started practicing independently in 2011. So it's been a little while now.
Yeah. And one of the things that I realized in my preparation for our conversation is you are really passionate about this. Um, so what first interested you in psychology as a field, as a study?
Yeah. So when I was a senior in high school, I took an AP psych class. And the professor just happened to be a former active duty Army psychologist.
Wow.
And that's where it all started. Before that, I thought I was going to be a journalist, a broadcast journalist. We had this incredible TV studio at my high school. So that was really interesting to me. And I all 4 years through high school, worked on that and thought that was my path, and then just fell in love with psychology.
Uh, that's amazing, because I think there are a lot of people who feel like, or they feel a fear of pivoting at times. And clearly you learned this or kind of embraced this much earlier. But there's so much pressure, I think, on a lot of folks to try to figure out what it is that they want to do by the time they get to college. And it really has, I think, a lot of negative impacts on just the freedom to explore and test and figure out, okay, what fields work best for you. Now, clearly you landed on something that you just really, really love, and you spent a lot of time learning about it. I don't normally do this, but if you're all right with it, I want to share just a little bit of the work that you've done in terms of your scholarly route to what you're doing now, right? So you
Sure.
have your bachelor's in psychology. You have three different masters, really, and still in the world of psychology, and then your doctorate, of course, in clinical psychology. So you dove into the deep end and just went straight for it. Was there ever a point in that journey where you were just kind of like, I, you know, I think I'm either going to really, really love this. I'm gonna keep going until I lock in, I figure it out. Or, on the other end, have I gone too deep into this? Have I, have I have I learned too much about this? And with the fear of maybe I'll figure out that maybe I don't like it so much.
Yeah. My so everything is psychology related, but my first master's degree was in industrial organizational psychology.
Hmm.
I did not think that I wanted to go to school for so long. So after my bachelor's, I did an accelerated master's program in a single year, and I thought that was going to be it for me.
Yeah.
But realized pretty quickly into the program that I wasn't going to be able to accomplish what I wanted to with a master's degree. So another pivot to a doctoral program when I finished the first master's degree to study clinical psychology. And then along the way to the doctorate in clinical psychology, there was a master's degree. And then since then, I've gone back and gotten another master's degree in clinical psychopharmacology. So, in the military and in certain states, psychologists are able to prescribe with these kind of degrees. At first, that's what I thought I wanted to do, was to be able to prescribe medication and do psychological assessment and therapy.
Yeah.
But that never happened for lots of reasons. But it is still extremely useful because I can talk to patients about medication. Psychiatrists are really busy and typically run by managed care, so appointments are short and to the point. And patients often come back and tell me, I didn't really get a chance to ask the questions that I have, or I'm experiencing these side effects. I can't get back in to see my doctor. So it's really nice to have that education to feel like I can answer some of those questions for them, and talk to them about those issues.
Very nice. Do you find that that kind of passion, or the area of your heart where you were passionate about journalism, do you find that that ends up actually shaping how you go about your work now? Or maybe it did during your time in study, because clearly there's, just a lot of interest in researching and learning more about how this best works and how to best care for people.
Yeah, I think the two seem pretty far apart, but there are these common threads. So, one is sort of storytelling or listening to other people's stories, which obviously is a big part of journalism, but probably even a bigger part of psychology and the work that I do. And the second piece, I think, is curiosity. So, that is probably how I ended up sort of with all of these degrees, probably several more than I needed. But just being a lifelong learner and enjoying that process. I always felt like school was really interesting, and there's always so much more to learn. So I
Yeah.
think that's also part of journalism, learning more about what's going on in the world around us, and definitely part of therapy and knowing more about our patients.
Yeah. And I think that's a beautiful part of, just the freedom to grow and discover more of who you are, right? Like that, having that inquisitiveness in you, and the freedom to actually say, okay, I think I'm curious about this area of psychology, or clinical pharma pharma
Pharmac.
psychopharmacology.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
knew I was gonna mess that up, but I had to get it right. I wouldn't allow my brain to do that to me. But clearly there's an inquisitiveness there, and I think it's a beautiful thing to have the freedom to say, you know what, I think I want to learn some more. I want to dive into this, and to do that. Because I think a lot of folks limit themselves, and kind of stop at some point, even if there's still that urge, still that kind of desire to discover more. They'll squelch that, and kind of call it contentment, I guess. So I think that's really, really cool. I also
Thank
noticed that you
you.
not only helped those in the military, you served yourself, right?
I did. Yeah.
In
Yeah.
in what capacity? Well, first, thank you for your service.
Thank
And in
you.
in what capacity did you serve? You served in a few different roles, if I read right.
Yeah, I was in the Army, initially active duty for several years, and then switched over to a reserve position. When I left active duty, I also, in terms of my full time job, went to work for the Army as a civilian. So I continued in military medicine for quite a while after that. Left the Army eventually to work for the Air Force as a civilian, and then ended up in private practice from there. But my heart is still very much in military medicine and working with troops for sure.
Yeah. Do you think your high school teacher had an influence on that?
It's interesting. I remember hearing his stories and sort of thinking, this is crazy, right? Because it's not what you think of a typical psychologist, right? The military offers these just incredible opportunities. So if I had taken a different path, I probably would have spent the last 10 years sitting at a desk. But instead, I've traveled all over the world. I've done all kinds of cool training exercises that I would have never done, gotten things like Lean Six Sigma training, that the Army thought was a good idea. So yeah, it's I think an incredible opportunity, and yes, probably had some motivation from my professor for sure. The Army also offers, I think all services probably offer a health professional scholarship program. So you apply, and if you're selected, you come on active duty once you finish grad school, and they help pay for a portion of your student loans,
Yeah,
which is incredible because, as we all know, student loans are expensive.
very.
Yes, and so that was fantastic for that opportunity as well.
Yeah. And for my own curiosity, what is, I think you call it Lean Six Sigma training?
Yeah, yep. So Lean Six Sigma is pretty common among those in the business profession. It's all about processes. I think other similar sorts of things would be Scrum, or
Okay.
there's probably tons of them. But it's been really interesting over the course of my career as I've tried to network with people or applied for other jobs. The military is probably what is sort of the hook for most people. There was one gentleman who really wanted to hire me because he liked sort of the security clearance aspect of it. I have a pretty high clearance, and so that's been helpful in lots of ways.
Yeah.
I think people are just interested because it is so different than maybe a more traditional psychologist role would be. So lots of different varied experiences because of that.
Yeah. Do you see it as different, or I guess different is the word.
Yeah, for sure, actually. So I think if I had not practiced in the military, I probably would be a much different psychologist now. In the military, there are certain issues that you don't deal with out in the regular civilian world. So, concerns about security clearances, concerns about fitness for duty, administrative separation. So, if somebody comes for mental health treatment and they're diagnosed with something, doesn't mean that they can no longer be in the military.
Mm,
You and I, and the roles we're in now, if we go to mental health treatment, probably nobody would know, right? Unless we share that with them. And
yeah.
it's not like that in the military, or at least not necessarily. Also, I think we probably try to be more cautious in terms of things like note taking and privacy, because there is just some differences there. And that is interesting because I suspect that that is why I ended up having the kind of private practice that I have now. So one of the things that I experienced while in active duty is lots of the higher ranking officers would not seek mental health, or if they did, they sought it out in the community, so nobody would know. They didn't use their insurance; they paid out of pocket and
Yeah.
kept it a secret. If they came to visit me, they would come in my office through the back door, so people wouldn't see them coming in the front door.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense in terms of stigma, but it's also really sad and kind of scary if you think about, so these people that have these huge responsibilities are not necessarily getting the mental health treatment that they need because they're worried about what other people think.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in my private practice, we specialize in working with high achieving individuals, professionals, healthcare providers, attorneys, politicians, pro athletes. So, the same sort of thing, people that maybe would not go to a traditional mental health clinic
Hmm.
for the same reasons. So, we try to offer those folks some additional privacy and protections just by the way we go about things.
Yeah. Now, oh man, there's so much there that I'm curious about. I'm trying to contain myself a little bit. Uh, but what do you have any thoughts around whether we're moving in a good direction, overall in terms of destigmatizing that for, um, those who are in those high positions, especially, I mean, they're dealing with severe, high pressure responsibilities and tasks and decisions that they have to make. I would imagine it would be extremely beneficial. I can see the security um, and privacy issue really being a concern because of the knowledge they have, clearly, in terms of who's authorized to sit with them. But I'd imagine it'd be extremely beneficial to do a lot of work to destigmatize that as quickly as possible. Do you what do you see as really kind of the main barrier to destigmatizing that, or maybe a couple different things?
Yeah, I think there are several barriers to that, I suppose. One thing that we as a community, mental health community, are doing well now is at least we're talking about stigma, right? So this is something that comes up probably in any interview that I do. People ask about this. I do think it's improving. There are leaders that make it a point to share their mental health treatment with others. I have some clients who work in an organization where their calendars are readily available to other people for scheduling purposes, and instead of just blocking out an appointment and not putting what it is, they intentionally put, something like mental health counseling so that their folks know that that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
I think in some areas it's probably much easier to do this in others. I remember asking a commander one time that I was seeing for therapy if he would be willing to share with his troops, right, that he
Yeah.
had gotten some treatment and it had worked well. And I suspected he would say yes. I mean, I was pretty confident, right, that he was going to agree to it and think it was a great idea. But that's not what happened. So he, he understood where I was coming from, and he also thought it would be good for someone to do that. He just wasn't willing for it to be him. So, yeah. Yeah. In general, in terms of barriers, culturally, there's so many different things. I have lots of Hispanic patients that tell me, that their families are not comfortable with them coming to therapy, even now as an adult. There's just all sorts of things. Men, sometimes I think maybe have this feeling about it being a sign of weakness instead of sign of strength to look into treatment. So yeah, the list goes on and on. But like I said, I am really glad that we're talking about it more as a community now and trying to think of ways to address it at least.
Yeah. I 100% agree with that. And I mean, for me, when I started my therapeutic journey, I think I started in 2019 seeing my therapist. And since then it's been a couple of years. So God bless the man. He's had to walk with me for a while. At this point, I mean, we're really good friends. He's very much my therapist, so there's a boundary there. But when I started, it it was a step of I think courage on my part, because similar to some of your Hispanic clients, hey, I'm originally Jamaican, born on the island of Jamaica, and just the idea, I'd never even heard the word therapy while I was on the island. I'm sure it
Mm-hmm.
existed somewhere, but the idea, there's just layers and layers of stigma, and just a lot of misinformation about what it is, what it's for, who it's for, and the kinds of folks that actually seek that help. So I can see that being a difficult thing, especially in uh, I guess you could say, just much older generations that have a very different understanding of it, and maybe don't know as much about how the field has grown and kind of developed over the last couple of years to step into a more modern era, or our understanding of it, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. One of the things at Halcyon that we say is that we are taking a modern approach, right? So this idea
Yeah.
that we're changing things up a little bit. I agree. I think age certainly plays a role in this at times. Culture 100% plays a
Yeah.
role. But even in younger generations, we still see lots of stigma. I think millennials in general are probably more accepting. They're more interested in their mental health and overall well-being than prior generations were. But still, lots of stigma, even amongst those that are willing to seek out treatment.
Yeah. And it's funny, I never quite looked at it this way until you said that specific, because I'm in the generation of millennials. And I think there is a weird progression that created a sort of openness to therapy that I never quite looked at until you said that, where there was, spirituality within organized religion. And then there's a transition to spirituality outside of organized religions as kind of an individual experience. That kind of moved into mindfulness and practices like meditating and yoga and so on. And I think that just created this progressional openness to stepping into therapy eventually. um I'm curious to see if there's any actual research around that, but that that just I've never looked at it that way. You mentioned the modern approach to mental health, and I did see that on your website. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean when you say a modern approach to mental health?
Yeah, sure. So we are almost exclusively virtual. So everything is online. It's sort of similar to Zoom. We use a platform that's HIPAA compliant and safe in that way. But we offer video or phone therapy. We find that this really works well for the clients that we see because of how busy and demanding their schedules are. So for example, if you are at work and you have a meeting, but you have a therapy appointment, in San Antonio, at least, you would drive probably 30 to 45 minutes to get to the office, right? You have your appointment, drive 30 or 45 minutes back. So now you've wasted at least 2 hours of your day that potentially you could have saved some time. So there's a big convenience factor. Also, lots of the folks we see travel for work. So as long as they're traveling to a state in which we're able to practice in terms of licensure, we can still see them while they're away on work or on vacation. We can also see couples in separate locations, so they can dial in separately, and we can do couples counseling, even when they're not physically located in the same place.
Yeah.
Also, just being more inclusive, we try to be very careful with the language that we use on the site to make sure that we are being as inclusive as possible. Earlier, I was mentioning some of these extra sort of privacy factors. So, mental health in general is extremely private and confidential, right? Laws require us to act in certain ways. And then, I think something important for people to realize is your therapist doesn't have any desire to share your information with anyone else, right? I mean, there's just not really a reason why that would happen. So, yeah. So in general, it's really private, but we try to go sort of the extra mile to make sure that people's concerns are addressed, anything to do with privacy. And then the last thing is making sure that we are providing a very individualized approach. So, there's research that tells us if we take people's lifestyle needs and activities into account, then they will get better treatment results. I think that intuitively makes a lot of sense, right? If I am not challenging you to try and change your life in order just to attend therapy, you're probably going to be more consistent and see more results from it. We also try to sort of meet people where they are. So sometimes people may not want to meet weekly, so there's no requirement to do that. Sometimes people may want to have 90-minute sessions every 2 or 3 weeks because of their schedule. So we're more than willing to accommodate that as long as it's clinically indicated. Yeah.
And that's also what you just described additionally was also adult concierge services, right? Therapy services.
Yes. Yep. So that very customized approach, willing to hear what the patient wants, right? This idea that you are the expert on you, not me, right? Maybe I'm the expert in terms of clinical psychology, but that doesn't mean I'm the expert on you. So having a very collaborative approach to treatment planning. One of the other things that we do that I think clients find really helpful is they have our personal cell phone numbers and our email. So if they need something from us, they can text or call or email us. There's not a third party to go through, right? So we don't have anybody at a front desk. We don't have them talking to anyone else at all. It's just us. And people like knowing that they could reach out if they need something. So maybe you and your partner have a huge fight tonight and you feel like you're in crisis and you want to come in tomorrow. Can we squeeze it in and make it happen? Absolutely. Yeah. We're going to figure out how to do that.
Yeah. And, clearly you've already said this, but I just want to reiterate. I think this is just a perfect approach for most modern day professionals because business in general is pretty much international at this point because now you start a business, your competition could be across the globe somewhere because you're working virtually or you're traveling because of what you do. And I know of a lot of individuals and know personally some individuals where the one barrier to them seeking the help they need is the fact that they're so busy. And it's like, well, I don't know if it'll fit into my schedule. What if they don't see me on nights or on weekends, or what if my week shifts and I can't see them on the same day every week? What then? Is it even a possibility? And it sounds like the approach and what you offer is just perfectly tailored for that individual. So if anyone's listening and you care at all about what I say, not that my opinion should matter all that much, I highly recommend this for you.
Well,
um
thanks. We appreciate the endorsement for sure. Yeah, I think exactly what you said is true. For most people now are so busy though, right? Like
yeah,
we frame it as professionals, but I have friends that stay home and raise kids, and they're unbelievably busy too. Nobody
yeah,
has a ton of time in their day. So trying to squeeze this in is just one more thing to add to the to-do list. So we want to make sure that the process is as simple as possible, that people feel like it's not a burden to try and get the care that they need.
yeah. Because self-care, just it in my opinion, it shouldn't be burdensome. It's work, in the same way you put an effort to, advance your career or to develop a healthy relationship with friends, family, spouse, however, whoever. There's work involved in doing those things, and there are times where it feels like work, but there are a lot of times where it's the process, and it's very much enjoyable. And I think you're helping to create a system or an approach that makes it that, where it's enjoyable, it fits. It's still a little bit of work, because again, you're dealing with some heavy stuff on in your inner world, but it's a necessary process that is genuinely helpful. And something else I wanted to point out: you are located in San Antonio, Texas, but you don't just work with individuals in that area, right? Because of the telehealth.
Yeah. So for therapy and assessment purposes, we actually see folks in 31 states. On the 1st of October, it'll actually go up to 32 states and
Congratulations.
counting. Yeah, thank you. So that's really exciting. For some people, one of the other benefits, think about somebody that lives like in a rural town. Maybe they don't even have a psychologist there, right? So it's not
Yeah,
just driving across town, but it's a matter of driving to the bigger city in order to get the specialty care. So now it's several hours out of their day in order to make it happen.
that's right.
So that's a great benefit, I think, for people in those types of communities. Also, there are some states that are just underserved, and where the mental health provider shortage is more prominent. And so this is a way to fill that gap, right? So to make sure that people can get the services that they need. For coaching services, we are international, so you can link up with our executive coach no matter where you are in the world, which has also been fantastic. As you said earlier,
Yeah.
business is international now, so that's been a great benefit too, I think, for folks.
If you struggle to reach the goals you set for yourself, the good news is it's most likely not because you're lazy or that you lack discipline. Statistically speaking, you're most likely struggling to reach your goals because your life is out of balance. In 2017, the Harvard Business Review reported that the United States spends more than $190 billion with a B, billion dollars to address the physical and psychological effects of burnout in the average working professional. And these numbers are from before the pandemic, so who knows what it is now. The point is, anyone trying to reach a goal while navigating burnout, whether consciously or subconsciously, is not set up to succeed. This was my experience until I discovered the life balance approach to reaching your goals and changing your life. This approach to reaching your goals takes into account your life balance as you work towards your goals. Subsequently, it basically guarantees success for almost any goal you're trying to reach. And I know that is a big promise, but it is very much realistic and very much possible. In my best-selling book, Life Balance, I outlined the principles of this formula. And due to popular demand, the online course for the book is now available. In this course, I walk you through each and every principle individually and how to apply it to your life. It's a self-paced course, so you can take it on your own time and go through it as quickly or as slowly as you would like. Every purchase includes a digital copy of my book, Life Balance, the Life Balance workbook in PDF format, and the Life Balance planner, also in PDF format. For a limited time, you can purchase this course at 50% off when you use promo code PODCAST. To purchase this course today, visit paulwcroswell.com. Now let's get back to the episode. When it comes to telehealth, I know that for a lot of folks, there's intimidation around the idea of, seeing, someone like a therapist for the issues that they're showing up for via, video call or any form of digital interactions. And I wanted to give you an opportunity because you mentioned HIPAA compliance, and I'm not sure a lot of people know what that means. I've worked with organizations that have, their goal was to create a platform to host just telehealth interactions between therapists and clients. But beyond that, you don't just engage with telehealth. You've actually authored a lot of literature around using telehealth and using it well. So this isn't just a thing you're trying to figure out how to use, which I know there are a lot of folks who are. You've actually helped to shape what it means to use it well.
Yeah, I guess that's true. So the military has been using telehealth, for years and years and years since the technology has existed. We use it to see troops that are geographically separated from wherever mental health resources are available. And so when I worked for the Army as a civilian, we also used that. So I had an office in San Antonio, but we saw service members all over the country. So I have been exposed to this for quite a while. I know it's become very popular during COVID, right? I think probably more so for patients just being more accepting of the idea because there wasn't a lot of options. But yeah, there are several of us that have been doing this even prior to COVID and not planning to go back to the traditional models. I do occasionally have somebody that will call and say, "Are you sure you can't see me in person?" I really want to work with you. Do you have an office? I want to come do this face to face. And I always suggest that we do a consultation call over video, right? I think the younger generations are more comfortable because we do everything on video or on our phones or computers or tablets or laptops, right? We all have all of these devices. For older folks, what we see is people are worried about not understanding the technology enough, not being able to log in. So sometimes it's necessary to spend some extra time talking about that, making sure that they do understand the inherent risk associated with using technology as opposed to face-to-face visits, understanding that interruptions may occur in a different way than possibly if you saw somebody face to face. But usually people are pretty quick to adapt and to adopt it, and typically buy in pretty quickly.
Do you provide any sort of complimentary trainings around how to use the platform to help folks get over that hump?
Yeah, so the platform we use is extremely intuitive. You click on something and enter in your information. So we don't provide any necessary training. That's an excellent point, though. I guess I haven't thought about that. We've never had anybody ask for it. My assumption is because it's self-explanatory and easy to use.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that's why. So usually it's more of like, if you can get on the internet, you can access the service, right? So I have spent time with people sort of talking about those things though, like how do you get on the internet? And then how do you get on the internet again, right? Because maybe somebody helps you set it up the first time, but the next time it's a challenge to figure out how to do it. Mm-hmm. There are some therapists that avoid that by using things like FaceTime. Unfortunately, that's not HIPAA compliant, so that's not something that that we use for that reason. But I do think it's a great option if everybody understands the risk involved, and using a computer isn't available for whatever reason.
Yeah. Now, and you've mentioned HIPAA compliance a few times, and because of the work I've done in this area, I I know really the extent that goes into a platform becoming HIPAA compliant, like the kind of hoops they have to jump through to make sure they can actually secure the interaction, maintain privacy and so on. What can you just maybe give a few sentences or a few thoughts around the idea of what it means that the platform is HIPAA compliant for someone who may not be familiar with what that means?
Yeah. Well, so HIPAA is a federal law which required us to create these standards around how to protect patient health information from being disclosed without the patient's consent or knowledge, right? Um, and so, as a result of that, there are all of these platforms that have made sure that they meet these various standards. And this is even above my heads in terms of what I understand about technology. But there are actual accreditation agencies. So, for example, when I built my website, I had somebody contact me and say, "Hey, we can." Perform this sort of audit and give you this stamp of approval. So
Yeah.
there's some business behind it. But there are lots and lots of platforms that this is all they do. And so they have lots of information they provide you about how they are HIPAA compliant. We even process our payments through the platform that we use. So everything is all in one spot.
Yeah, that's
And
super convenient.
yeah, it is. We, as providers, it is super convenient, saves us a ton of time and headache. But I think patients also really like it because they don't have to try and figure out anything else, right? Everything is in one place and they know where to do it.
Yep.
So that's really nice. And the platforms always say things like, it uses the same encryption that banks use for online banking. So I think as long as you're using a reputable platform, that you're okay, right? I guess I would just
Yeah.
caution for people that are just getting into this, doing some research so that you're not using things like FaceTime or, maybe things that don't meet the federally mandated requirements.
Yeah. And just a big part of that with the HIPAA compliance is your personal security, the security of your information as a client, and just what's being communicated between you and your counselor. And so for anyone who's kind of hesitant about this, I see this as just a really, really, clearly it's a necessary thing, it's a legal thing, but it's a really good thing for anyone who's on the fence about, well, how do I know? I'm still a little iffy about, is it all right? How do I know my information secure? How do I, just all of that. If that's a hesitation you have, the fact that the platform is HIPAA compliant is a very, very good thing. And I think that should give you some solace, some comfort
Yeah.
in terms of moving forward. I wanted to jump back to the military for just a moment and ask if, so you've had a lot of experience in working with those in military and just kind of in that environment, security clearance, all of that. Do you find that, just some of the things you learned in your time in that environment, in that sphere, how is that shaping maybe how you run or shape your practice that might be a little bit different from someone who have not had that experience?
Yeah. Yeah. I think as a person, the military has shaped me quite a bit, right? Um, uh, Probably for good and for bad, if I'm being completely honest about it. But the military lifestyle is sort of an all in, right? It's
Yep.
it's 24 hours a day. And so I think that plays a big role in just sort of our culture and how we approach things. Um,
Yeah.
One of the other huge benefits of the military is how quickly you are put in positions of leadership. So, maybe in a civilian position, I would not have managed things until I had been practicing for years and years and years. But in the military, pretty quickly, you have people that are working for you and reporting to you, and you're in charge of the mental health of huge numbers of people, right? I mean, it's kind of staggering actually to think about these sorts of responsibilities. So I think that has made a big difference too. And just confidence, we have this idea, fake it till you make it. I know that's pretty common now, I think, but I think the military really does sort of reinforce that and try and give you the tools to learn what you need to know in order to get the job done right from the beginning.
Like in a professional way, you're almost forced to, I guess, grow up professionally pretty quickly, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you were saying that, I was thinking about, people say like, oh, it's not life or death, but it is, right? In the military, it is for those of us that have been deployed. And I think in mental health in general, really, at times it's life or death, right? We're dealing with some pretty big things. So yeah, there's this sort of you're right, forced progression in terms of your career, in terms of your leadership. I also really loved, you move around, right? So maybe somebody in the civilian world would take a job and stay in the same position for, 4, 5, 10, 20 years, whatever it is. And in the military, that's
40.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, for some people that's great and it works well. But I think for other people, you can start to feel sort of stagnant or complacent. So the military forcing you to adapt to new situations and new people and new positions really helps broaden your horizons and, just offers, I think, more skills in that way as a result.
Yeah. And I think that is uniquely beneficial for someone in a helping position like yourself, right? In a helping field like psychology and counseling, because it helps you to actually interact with very different kinds of people in a consistent way.
Yeah, that is an excellent point. Yeah, I think one of my best qualities as a psychologist is being able to relate to people and to people from all different walks of life. So the military definitely gives you that, right? You interact with a huge number of people and they are much different from you. And being able to travel and see the world and see people from other places that maybe you wouldn't if you weren't in the military, also, I think plays a role in all of that. Yeah, just sort of these more worldly perspectives, outside perspectives that help grow.
Yeah. Um, this is sort of a left field question. It just popped into my head a moment ago. But for the individual who's listening and maybe they're from a background where there's still just a lot of misinformation or stigma around going to see a therapist, and they're like, man, I really want to. I'm just not sure if it's even for me. How do I know it works? Or like, and I'm kind of formulating this as I'm going here because I'm pulling it out of the air as it's coming to me. But I think that the thought behind it is, for someone listening who's just kind of on the edge of actually seeking help, seeking going to a counselor, going to a psychologist, do you have any words of encouragement for that individual who's just kind of on the edge and they're just kind of like, I really want to take the step, but what if, what if, what if, what if, what if?
Yeah. We know that the fit, right? The patient provider fit is what makes the biggest difference when we're talking about talk therapy. So making sure that you find somebody that feels like it's somebody that you trust and somebody you connect with. My practice actually gets lots of people who had another therapist or counselor and felt like that person was judging them or not really listening to them. And they end up leaving the relationship because of it, which, good for them. That's excellent that they end up doing that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so finding the connection. I think, unfortunately, it can be difficult to find the right person. It's a little bit different if you are looking for a radiology a radiologist, for example, like you just need that person to be able to read your scan. You don't have to like them. You don't have to feel comfortable or want to see them on a regular basis. But with psychologists, it's a little bit different, right? There's sort of this more personal aspect that goes into it. So finding a good fit, I think, is really important. Knowing that it is a brave thing to do, right? It takes a lot of courage to take that first step and to seek help. But there are tons of options. And I think most providers now, we sort of realize that there are lots of people that are showing up for the first time feeling that way. I try to talk to people about that during the first session. I ask them if they've been to therapy or any sort of mental health provider before and try and normalize that anxiety, right? And that just uncertainty about the whole situation. Sometimes it takes people a little bit of time to warm up and to get used to how things work and this idea of sharing things with, a stranger in reality.
Yeah.
But people like it, right? And I think that makes sense if you think about how helpful it can be to have somebody that is neutral, a third party that has no agenda in your life. They're not going to tell you that they don't like your girlfriend or that you're going to disappoint your father or whatever it is. We're really there just to support you,
Yeah.
and without any other sort of considerations or our own considerations. So I think that can be nice. I'm obviously biased. I think everybody can benefit from therapy, right? I mean, sometimes people think that, maybe their symptoms aren't severe enough. But lots of therapy is sort of this counseling, right? This can be coaching for people that don't meet criteria for a psychiatric condition, and they're just going through something tough, right? Or trying to work out something from their past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I think that's a great point. That's actually one of the things I was hesitant when I was writing my book to include, just some of the transparently some of the thoughts that I had around therapy and seeking therapy because of the background that I grew up with, and just between media and our overall understanding of it, or limited understanding of it. There's just so much that was like, oh well, uh, the popular term we hear is like therapy or psychology. Going to a psychologist is for quote unquote someone you'd call crazy, and that is such one. If we are all honest, there's a little bit of crazy in all of us. However,
that's exactly right.
however, that aside, that is such an untrue statement and idea. It is deeply untrue, deeply misleading, and I think it causes a lot of people to forfeit potentially life-changing help that they can get from seeing a really healthy and good therapist.
Yeah, yeah. It's a shame too. Earlier we were talking about the stigma around mental health. Some people don't like going to medical professionals in general, but other people feel much more comfortable if it's physical health, right? If we're talking about something that it would be okay to tell your friends and family about, right? Nobody's going to question you if you are going to see a physician because you have a swollen ankle or whatever it is. So yeah, that's a big part of it too, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I was reading a research paper, I think yesterday or at some point this week, and it was on coaching, which is very different from, therapy. That's a whole different conversation, I'm sure. But what the paper was pointing out is that there is something called the coaching ripple effect, where you know the if you're coaching someone who maybe is leading in an organization, or they're just on the team in an organization, studies, and this is coming out of the UK and Sydney, universities in the UK and in Sydney, where studies are showing that if that individual, as they develop, as they grow, as they become more of a strong, competent leader, who's just their overall well-being improves, that the people who are closely connected to them in the organization, their well-being also improves, and their overall experience in the organization also improves. And I feel like there has to be some correlation or some connection to this idea in the world of I don't know if there are any studies on this, but in the world of psychology and counseling, because I can't imagine it not being true in the same way. Whereas if you as the leader or just someone on the team in an organization just begin to see counseling and get help, or maybe even in your home, you begin to see counseling and get help, that it actually has a positive effect, a recognizable positive effect on people who are closely connected to you.
Yeah. So I don't know that I'm familiar with the study or the paper that you mentioned, but I think it makes a lot of sense. I can totally see how that would be the case. I think organizations are recognizing this too. Something that I realize that I've seen in the past couple of years are these well-being officers, these sort of positions, even C-suites. Yeah, execs that have this title of well-being. I think that's amazing that we've sort of figured out this really does make a big difference in terms of our company culture, in terms of how well our organization succeeds as a team. I think that's where that idea comes from.
Yeah, yeah. I did have one last question for you, and then we'll land this plane if that's where it leads us. Okay. um I've had a few conversations with just folks who again are in the helping field, whether it's counseling, coaching, mentoring, so on. And in more than one of those conversations, the idea has come up of really just kind of the issue that exists in helping active military individuals transition to civilian life, and the bridging or lack thereof, psychological help that's necessary to help those individuals to do that. In your experience, do you feel like overall, I guess specifically, the U.S. military overall, do you feel like we're moving in a healthy direction in creating systems and whether it's organizations and so on that's helping those individuals, or are we stagnant, or are we, what are you seeing in just your experience?
Yeah. I really want to say yes. That I really do. I really
I
do.
think we all do.
I personally have to be pretty careful. I think sometimes I can be critical of the military, and I try to not do that because I think when people hear me talking, it sort of sounds like my experience overall or my perception overall is negative if I'm, pointing out these sort of criticisms. But that couldn't be further from the truth. I said earlier, the military has definitely shaped me as a person and professionally, and I would not change my experiences. That being said, one of the reasons why I left military medicine is because I think we could do such a better job taking care of our service members. And there's all of this political BS that gets in the way of us being able to do that. That's extremely frustrating as a provider. I know it must be even more frustrating as a service member or a family member of a service member. And it's a shame. There is lots of work that goes into this, right? I mean, there are definitely advocates that are screaming from the rooftop that we need to improve our programs, and it's something that we're working on all the time. It's hard the military is such a large number of people. If you think about a small organization and the way it works versus a much larger organization, it's hard to rein things in when you have such a large number of people, and there are so many other sort of aspects, right, or things to consider. So I think
branches,
yes, yeah, exactly. Yes, yeah. So I think that gets in the way. In the military too, like this focus on readiness, right, and basically being ready to go into battle is our priority. I think over time we've tried to say that that's not the case. I would disagree with that and say it's more lip service than the way things really are, but I think maybe necessarily so, especially with the continued wars. If we were at in peacetime, maybe that would change things a little bit. But even then, you're training in preparation. So anyway, I guess that's a long-winded answer to your question. But there are programs that exist. And I think that there are always programs in the works. But there is a lot left to do. And I think some pretty big gaps in terms of that transition period, especially. You had said active duty, but even reservists. So if you think about somebody that's in the reserves and they deploy, so they spend, 12 months away from their family, away from their regular job, and then they're just sort of dropped back into society. That is really difficult. Another time is at retirement. One day you're in the military and the next day you're not, and you sort of have to figure out who you are without the military. I don't think that there's always such a smooth transition or, sort of like a easy guide for people to follow to figure out how to navigate that.
Yeah. What do you think is or are, some of the bigger barriers to us getting better at that? Is it, solely political and it's just, figuring out how to navigate this conversation in that world, or is there more?
Yeah. So, funding is always an issue when we talk about anything because you have to have money to run these programs. And that does get very political.
Yeah.
There's also just having the resources to implement. So even if you do have the funding to create programs, you have to have people to run the programs and to continue to oversee the programs. In my experience in the military, there were lots of great ideas. And they were put out as if, they were sort of a fully developed initiative. And then it turns out, maybe it wasn't taken all of the way that it should have been. So there were, again, just some gaps there. So that's an issue. And then, we were talking earlier about stigma and also just the sheer volume of people in the military. Those are both big factors too, I think. One other thing that we haven't talked about in terms of transition, I guess, would be, lots of the unhoused that we see are veterans. And it's sort of interesting if you think about people that were willing to sign up to serve their country and potentially give their life for their country. And now we're not doing such a good job taking care of them. That's even more so the case when we throw in those that do have psychiatric conditions. It can be more difficult to sort of get them the help that they need. But it's a sort of sobering fact, I think, and hard to accept that that's the state that we're currently in.
Yeah. So, I mean, the good news, I think, is you've mentioned some of it, that there's always programs and different things being kind of thought about and created and
Yeah.
offered. But clearly there's a lot of work, there's a
Yeah.
lot of processing and thinking this through that's necessary if we're going to do this well.
Yeah. I love that you turned it around there. I was just thinking, oh, what a terrible note to end on.
No,
Debbie
no,
Downer,
no.
right? Yeah,
No,
you're
go ahead.
exactly
I'm
right.
sorry.
So there are great programs in place. There's always help, right? I mean,
Hmm.
reaching out to a coach, even somebody that doesn't know anything about the military, but is willing to learn or to just listen to your story and relate to you is a great resource.
Yeah.
There are tons of veterans that are out providing services sort of independently that probably can relate a little bit more easily. Yeah, there are lots of options. I think people being willing to seek care is an issue. And then sometimes we just don't know what's out there. So
Yeah.
trying to figure out how to make these more accessible to the general public, how to link people up with resources. But yeah, there are some great programs. There's definitely great people out there trying to help. So there is lots of good news here too.
Yeah, and I think one of the good news pieces that you didn't mention was folks like yourself who have launched practices, and you're bringing this service into just a more I guess you could say feasible, more, what's the word I'm looking for here? Um, accessible, in a more
Yeah.
accessible way. And I think that is a massive, massive help uh, to the overall problem. And I think the more that you have conversations like these, the more that you offer the services you offer, and clearly continue, you're continuing to put thought and just innovation into how you are doing this, which I think is absolutely necessary. Innovation is so key to this, to making it more accessible, making it something that more people, one, know about, and two, feel comfortable actually stepping into. And I think you're doing a very good job at that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's really great to hear.
Absolutely. Now, as we wind down here, do you have any upcoming projects or events or resources or anything like that that you are excited about, that you want people to know about? I know you mentioned that you're launching a new business. Uh,
Yeah.
if you want to talk a little bit about more about that, or if you want to just mention something else or anything else that's coming up.
Yeah, yeah, I would love to. I am really excited. We are adding another psychologist to the team at Halcyon,
Nice.
Dr. Melissa Miller. Yeah, and she specializes in anxiety. That is definitely not my specialty. So it's awesome to be able to add somebody to sort of broaden our services and our expertise. So that is very exciting.
Yeah.
And then in terms of Calliope Mental Health, yeah, we're yes, excited doesn't begin to describe it. So, accessibility is a huge issue. So we're hoping that offering this virtually will make a big difference for people. Usually, autism services and resources are geared towards children,
Yeah.
but there are lots of adults that are undiagnosed, or there are certain groups that are underdiagnosed: women, minorities, people of color. There's lots of cultural differences because all of our diagnostic criteria is based on white males. So we're excited to be able to offer this. We're hoping to launch in the next month, I guess. So hopefully in October, November at the latest.
Okay. So
Yeah.
by the time this airs, you'll have already launched, and folks will be able to look into this. So
Yes. Yep. So we have a site up now. So you can find some information there. But yeah, by the time this is out, we will be up and running.
that's so exciting. And you mentioned the expertise of the new counselor you're adding, but we didn't get a chance to mention some of what you focus on. I know trauma is one of them, relationships.
Yeah, yeah. So again, the military sort of forces you to be a jack of all trades to some extent. But since leaving the military, I have done much more work related to relationships. It's fascinating because people come in, right? They seek therapy for something,
Yeah.
and then once we get into it, it turns out it's very much relationship related. So I spend a great deal of time talking to people about that. Yeah. So um, we also work with adult ADHD. That's another sort of area I think that is underserved,
Mm.
and services that are underutilized. So we do a lot of work there. I like working with folks that have depression and sort of helping them get control back of their life and live the life that they want to lead.
That's so awesome, man. I love what it is that you do. I love what you're offering through the services and the businesses you have. I'm just excited for what's happening and what you're offering right now, and I hope it just continues to grow.
Thank you. Yeah, us too. Yeah, definitely. Thanks.
Yeah. I have genuinely enjoyed this conversation. And I think this is a great stopping point for us. I would love to have you on again at some point. If you choose to maybe write a book, or if you want to talk about the new business in detail, you let me know. There's a space for you here whenever. But I've genuinely enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Julie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And guys, that's it for our conversation for today. I mean, I hope you enjoyed this as much as I have. All of Dr. Julie's links will be in the description of this episode. So if you're listening and you're like, okay, you've convinced me, I'm over the stigmas to some extent, enough at least to take action, then all you have to do is go to the description of this episode, tap one of those links. You will get connected to Dr. Julie or just any of the practices there that have been mentioned to get some help. Guys, have a good one. Until next time, take care. That's it for today's episode. I truly hope you enjoyed the show. To learn more about today's guests, including the links and resources related to everything we discussed, visit the podcast page at paulwcroswell.com, where you can find the entire podcast archive, as well as information about my book titled Life Balance, as well as the Life Balance Planner, and much, much more. If you'd like to support the podcast, the easiest and most impactful thing that you can do is subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and on YouTube. Also, leaving a positive review or comment is also important and greatly appreciated. Sharing the show or your favorite episode with friends or on social media is, of course, awesome and very helpful. Finally, for podcast updates, special offers on the Life Balance Planner, online courses, and more, please subscribe to our newsletter. You can find a link to do so in the show notes.